So as you heard, I was, for 25 years, the senior minister of the Fox Valley UU Fellowship in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I have to tell you that the annual stewardship campaign sermon was perhaps the greatest preaching challenge I faced each year. So how do you give basically the same stewardship message, which I would boil down to two sentences? Generosity is a key to spiritual practice, and the quality of our spiritual community greatly depends on the degree of our generosity. Okay, how to do that 25 times. And I never missed a stewardship sermon. Even my sabbaticals were arranged so I would not miss stewardship kickoff. So it was with a great sigh of relief and a smile on my face that I did my last stewardship sermon in February last year. My last one ever. So you fast forward now to a couple months ago, my colleague Molly contacts me to help cover maternity leave by doing a sermon. Of course, I would do that for any colleague, and you need to know, oh, you already know, Molly is a wonderful, talented, incredible minister in person. I'd do anything for Molly. Then she says, how about the stewardship sermon? No! Say it ain't so! But I'll do anything for Molly. Sure. So here I am, doing the last thing I expected to do in February this year. And actually, I have to say I'm thrilled. Partly I'm thrilled because I do love Molly and I love your church and what your church stands for and does in the world. And partly I'm thrilled because of those words from Thomas Merton. Those words have been rattling around in my mind back to Labor Day weekend when my wife and I went to New Harmony, Indiana, this incredible spiritual town where two utopian communities in the early 1800s existed. And there's spiritual signs and stuff all around, labyrinths and everything. And there was this little sign that had that quote from Thomas Merton, and it arrested me. It stopped me. And I took a photo of it, and I've thought about it almost every day since. But I don't have a regular pulpit anymore, so I haven't been able to do a sermon on it until you asked. So these months I've been pondering these words from Merton as the civil war rages on and on and on in Syria, as hundreds of thousands of refugees come to Europe, as so many of our political leaders, even presidential candidates in our country, have said and proposed terrible things about Muslims, regarding Muslims and immigrants. There is, it seems to me, something in the human condition that makes it so hard for us to live with people who seem different from ourselves. I wish it were not so, but it seems like it is a human struggle everywhere. Ostracizing someone on the playground who appears physically different or different in ability or skin color, that's actually related to putting people in concentration camps. Sure, the response on the playground is a whole lot less loaded than rounding up people in a concentration camp, but at their core, both of these are tragic human responses to difference. I was digging through your church website, and I noticed a frank, good statement. It's contained in some of the words explaining your mission, and especially the word courageous, I think. Your website says, sometimes it is not easy to love the stranger, the homeless person, or even the world. How true. Sometimes, and we don't like to say this in churches, it's not easy to love the other people, some of them in church. And sometimes it's not easy to love some of the people in our families. So this has been the human story for a long, long time. And there is a quintessential Unitarian Universalist response to difference that we all, I think, have to reckon with, even though it's not as bad as rounding up people or announcing that our country shouldn't accept Muslims to visit or live here. What we Unitarian Universalists tend to do with difference is flatten it. We do that by saying, let's instead focus on the universal in humanity. And the problem here is that way too often in our history, this universal we lift up ends up looking a whole lot like ourselves. So we pretend that deep down, everyone's just like us. That's a problem. This kind of pretending reminds me of a story of pretending in American history. In the aftermath of the Civil War, there was, certainly a great rupture in relationship between whites in the North and whites in the South. They've been trying to kill each other for 4 years. So disunion was not just between blacks and whites in this country, but also between North and South. And then came this period of extraordinary reunion among whites, kicked off by Reconstruction. Decades later, a powerful symbol of reunion took place on the 50th anniversary on the battlefield of the war's most significant battle, Gettysburg. So in 1913, survivors of Pickett's charge, Confederates who had charged, Union soldiers who had repelled the charge, they came together at that field in Gettysburg and with great fanfare shook hands across that line. One thing, there were no black veterans at that event. Their existence in the hundreds of thousands in the Union Army had been carefully excised from the history that whites knew about or were conscious of. So this reunion, see, we're all alike, was really a complete lie and a fabrication. Whites on both sides pretended that there had never been black soldiers. They pretended that this reunion of whites shaking hands with whites on the field with so many, this reunion, they pretended that this was real, that this was the real work of reunion. But it wasn't. They were not doing the painful, real work of reunion. It was a sham. And it's not surprising that around that same decade, there was an upsurge in this country of Jim Crow laws, of segregation, of lynchings in Appleton, where I lived for so long. There had been a thriving black population in 1900. By 1920, that population was zero. Why? Because of Klan activity, because of police oppression and harassment. The scene at Gettysburg in 1913 is not unrelated to what happened in Appleton and a whole lot of places around this country. One of the important and to me priceless challenges of Black Lives Matter is that it demands that white allies explore and understand how white lives differ from black lives. The movement is demanding that those of us who are white look at our privilege as white people, and that we need to understand that being a black person in this country is a whole different experience. This is painful work. It's not as painful as worrying if I had a son or a daughter of color what might happen if they get pulled over. It's not that pain. But it's the pain of confronting my own racism, my own privilege that I've been oblivious to. It's painful work. Liberation is not about singing Kumbaya or We Would Be One from our hymnal and pretending we're all the same. The work has to begin with a reckoning of how we are different, how our experiences are different. The debate between all lives matter and Black Lives Matter captures this, and this debate is going on in a whole lot of UU congregations. Black Lives Matter begins with broken bones. In this country, like pretty much everywhere in the world, we have done a terrible job mostly living together. Slavery, lynchings, Jim Crow, the quasi-apartheid that exists in so many parts of our country, like St. Louis where I live, these are all signs of broken bones. The broken bones in black bodies are more obvious and literal, although still a lot of whites seem to miss that fact. But make no mistake, we are all broken. Black Lives Matter calls this out. Bones cannot be reset unless we acknowledge first that they're broken. And resetting these bones is painful. Painful for blacks in a different way, painful for whites, painful for all people of color, painful for everybody. But this painful resetting is what we must do. That's part of the message of Black Lives Matter. And as Merton asserts in that reading, there are two things we can do in response to the pain of disunion: love or hate. It's really that simple. The last line from the sign in New Harmony just haunts me. Hatred recoils from the pain and sorrow that are the price of resetting the bones. It refuses the pain of reunion. So the question that Black Lives Matter poses for all of us is, are we willing to embrace the pain and the sorrow of resetting the bones? Are we willing to embrace the pain of doing the work of reunion? And if we are, then we're on the path of love. And if we're not willing to take in and work through that pain and sorrow, we're on the path of hate. And it's not just if we spout off words like Donald Trump, but if we take refuge in all lives matter, we're actually on the path of hate. Your church's mission to me is compelling and wonderful and difficult. We just read it together with the offering. In the spirit of courageous love, we forge a community of radical welcome and deep connection that moves us together to heal the world. That mission is about resetting the bones, the broken bones of disunion. I don't think there's a more important mission in the world. And the theme of your annual stewardship drive reflects this mission: building bridges, building community. In your little neck of the woods, prairie, wherever this is, you're trying to build beloved community within these walls and then expand the circles beyond. You're trying to live in the spirit of love. And again, there is nothing more important than this work. Sure, you know, I know, on your own, you're not all going to save the world, but you're going to be part of saving the world. You're going to be part of it. You're going to be part of the answer of the broken bones of disunion. So the goal of your annual stewardship drive to me has absolutely nothing with raising money. Sorry, stewardship chair. That's actually in and of itself not a worthy goal. The goal of your stewardship drive is to have the money you need to fulfill that great mission, to help reset the broken bones of the world. Everything you do here, worship, religious education, social justice, everything serves that mission. And the plain fact is that if you're going to make progress in that mission, you're going to need to be generous in this stewardship drive. So how does this mission stack up against the other ways you spend money in your lives? Does your spending reflect your deepest values? If not, why not? And what could you do to bring that into alignment? This stewardship campaign is an opportunity for each of you to reflect on these questions. About 20 years ago, my wife and I were in a place in our lives where we reflected on these questions, and we realized that we were not spending monies in ways which fit our values, reflected our values. So we committed then to tithing, to giving away 10% of our income. Now I think at the time we were giving away maybe 4%, and 4 to 10%, that was a lot to do. we decided to take it slow. We decided that year we'd go up to 5%, and the next year 6%, and then 4 years later we at 10%, and we made it. I know not everyone can do this. I totally get that. I'm grateful that we were blessed to be able to do it, and I have to tell you, it's been a great joy, not a burden in the slightest. I believe so strongly in your mission and your amazing work, which I know is making a difference in St. Louis, where I live, because of your work with our legislature, among others. I'm going to joyfully give the honorarium I'm getting today from you back to your stewardship campaign, because I believe in this. So thank you for that opportunity. And I feel moved as an outsider to say two things that I always wanted to say to my folks back in Appleton. The first is that I hope everyone will make a pledge, a $1 pledge from someone who is struggling financially is every bit as meaningful as a $10,000 pledge from someone who's blessed financially. Last year in your congregation, you estimated that an astonishing 96% of potential pledgers actually made a pledge. That's amazing. I'm jealous. We never did that in Appleton. That's incredible. I've never heard a number that high. That really says a lot. And you have the goal this year of 100%. 185 pledges, and you've got 35?
36.
36, which is a good start. You can do it, and it'll be amazing if you're able to do it. And what will be amazing is the impact that has on fulfilling your mission. Second thing I want to say, get your pledge cards in on time. At Fox Valley, we took so much volunteer time and energy to chase down people with their pledges that finally at some point about 10 years ago I said, I'm going to do that work. Because people, when they get the call from the minister, are embarrassed and respond. That's something I'm really not going to miss this February. Well, be good to your volunteers. And Molly's going to have a baby, so she's not going to be able to do these calls either. So get your pledge cards in before February 28th. Right? All right. I want to close today with some wonderful stirring words from Olympia Brown, who's one of the ancestors of our faith. She was the minister at the Racine Universalist Church in Wisconsin for many years, and then retired and was a famous suffragist. And she went back to her church there at the age of 85 and did a sermon. And I think it might have been the stewardship sermon. She concluded her sermon with these words: "Dear friends, stand by this faith. Work for it and sacrifice for it. There is nothing in the world so important to you as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before you the loftiest ideals, which has comforted you in sorrow, strengthened you for noble duty, and made it beautiful for you." Dear Columbia friends, there's nothing in the world so important as your congregation, its mission, and this faith. You and Columbia and Missouri and beyond are so lucky that your congregation is here making such a difference. May you spend your time and money in ways that reflect this wondrous truth. May it be so.